talking to yourself and it's coming back to you, but I'm glad to welcome you to the broadcast today.
Thank
You
you.
you've written a book called Liberated Mind, a
Yep.
guide to Black clarity, and that's what brings us to this conversation. And I want to start by thanking a friend to the show, Robert Allen, because he texted me and he said, "You need to talk to this brother." So here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's
Good brother.
start with your story, Tim, because I know I mentioned that you're a resident of Glenville, and I'm sure that had a huge part in shaping the direction and the trajectory of your life and leading you to this idea of sociology. And I say psychology just because your book, the foreword, was written by Naim Akbar, Dr. Naim Akbar.
Mhm.
So we'll get to that, but talk about how Glenville shaped your trajectory and put you in the realm that you're in now.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate it. First of all, Vince, I appreciate allowing me to be on your show. You know, it reminds me of back in the day when I was growing up. There was a show called WJMO, and we used to listen to that every morning before I got ready to go to school. Um, Growing up in Glenville was a big deal. I mean, you, your your context matters. So when I grew up, it's an all black neighborhood. I knew nothing different. Um, uh, there's a sociological a concept called the social construction of reality, and my reality was constructed by my environment, and uh, everywhere around me was black. But I was always wonder why, you know, growing up on 95th and St. Clair, we live like we did, and you go up on up on in Cleveland Heights or Shaker Heights, they was living differently, and I just didn't understand that as a child, and so it had a profound impact on my on how I viewed the world, and my all my relationships. But Glenville was pivotal in shaping who I am today. And it's still pivotal because I'm still very involved in Cleveland. I'm still very involved in the city. From a think tank that we founded is still operating, but Glenville was shaped uh, exactly who I am today.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. You were the founder of the HBCU Preparatory School here in Cleveland, and you co-founded Policy Bridge, which is an organization focused on advancing equitable policy solutions. So, if you could just give us an idea of why that came about.
Oh man, thank you. The first one was Policy Bridge, and that we founded that. I co-founded it with um, Mark Batson and Randy McShepard, who are very involved in Randy, very involved in Cleveland, and that came about because I was always wondering when I heard politicians talk about the issues that were going on in Cleveland, the issues that was happening to Black people. I was like, where are they getting their information from? And and it was all policy oriented, and I always believe that programs are derivatives of public policy, right? And I'm saying whoever controls the money and shapes policy really shapes on the ground the programs that affect our people. And I was trying to figure out where are they getting their information from? And there was no, in my mind, credible source that was advocating for our people, that they got legitimate data from. Uh, and so we set out to create a, a a think tank that was specifically focused on issues that impacted Black people. And so and that's how it formed. And and then the HBCU preparatory schools, I have my bachelor's degree is in early childhood education. I ended up working in the Cleveland School District. Long story short, during the time that the Cleveland School District was going through reform, and when they had the state control and they turned the school system from state control to mayoral control, where at the time it was Mike White. He was the mayor of the city of Cleveland, right? And then he became the mayor of the city of Cleveland and the school system. And I was in that time period where I was helping to reform the schools. And during that time also, there was another reform of public education going on, and it was charter schools. And so the charter school movement was a reform of public schools. And so I started working in the charter school space, helping other people set up charter schools around the state and around the country. And then I realized that, wait a minute, this is a way in which that we can control our own education. These are independent schools that we can control the curriculum, that we can control who gets hired, that we can hire our own people, that we can create information and curriculum that is designed for Black people. And so I went ahead, and because I was doing it for other people, did it for myself. And I used a model. I said, so what's the best model in America? What is the most proven model in America for educating Black people? And in my mind, it was the HBCU system of education, historically Black colleges and universities. So I took from that model, and what I attempted to do was create a system of education starting from kindergarten that connected to the HBCU system. And so hence the HBCU preparatory schools in Cleveland. It was one of the most successful charter schools, public schools that we had in the city. And then I shut them down in like 2018.
Okay. That's really interesting, because now we're looking at basically, I want to call it the de-evolution of our school system, because of the fact that they're closing schools. And I think last week they just announced the layoffs of 300 teachers.
Man.
So, and the students, just like back in the 70s, are raising their voices, and they're saying, hey, this is not right, but I just wonder, what can be done in the face of a shrinking student population, in the face of shrinking dollars, federal cutbacks, and all of that. And then I think about the whole purpose of our American educational system.
Right.
It does not seem that the student is the center of it. It just seems like business is the center of it.
Well, for us, we've never been centered in education. Not since we've been here in these United States, been the center of education, except to, as Carter G. Woodson says, miseducate and use our lack of knowledge or our ignorance to support a system that was built in a capitalistic system, to your point, to make other people wealthy and rich. So it's never been designed for us. Yeah. And so, that's why it's so important for us to get to a place. And this is one of the reasons we'll end up talking about the book at some point, but that's one of the reasons that's so important for us to take the time to understand the conditions that are impinging on our mind, on our life, so that we can make better decisions for ourselves and our families and our community.
So talk about the impact that the HBCU prep school had, and why at a point you decided to discontinue it.
The HBCU preparatory schools had a powerful impact in the city of Cleveland. It was, matter of fact, it was right, not too far from where your Larchmere Arts organization is at, on Shaker Square, right up the street from Shaker Square, in a place called Our Lady of Peace. And we had 300 students, all Black, not because I tried to recruit all Black, but that's where it is, right? So So because of that, we had the ability to create an environment that reflected who we are as a people. So when you walk through the hallways, you seen James Baldwin, you seen Muhammad Ali, you saw W.E.B. Du Bois, you saw Frantz Fanon, you saw images of us, you saw African symbols that represented us beyond just slavery, right? And so if you have a child that is immersed in that type of environment from the time they're in kindergarten through 8th grade, you set a strong foundation of who they are. We have the ability to say, well, here's the curriculum, here's the books that you read, here's the things that we do, here's the extracurricular activities that we do. We had drumming circles. We brought people into the school to speak, like brother Anthony T. Browder, right? So you had a school, and so the school, a school is the most grassroots organizations that we have in a community. It's because we got the children and their parents. So now we're not just teaching the children, we're also teaching the parent and the parents, the parents' parents and the cousins, so we got a community. And so you have a school like that that's over time begins to bleed out into a community and has an effect on a community. And so HBCU Prep had a tremendous impact in the city of Cleveland. You know, and so part of the issue why I ended up closing it is because the school was doing so well for so long. But it's also, we're talking about a business. These are also businesses. It takes, you have, you know, $10 million budgets, right? You have employees, you have transportation, you have food service, you have technology. This is a company. This is not just, so you're not just a kindergarten, but you have to run it like a business. And that means you have to reinvest in your business. It means you have to have resources to be able to sustain yourself over time. The problem that we ran into is because we were Black, we had issues sustaining ourselves over time. And so we got to a place where I could not get enough resources to feed back into the school to continue the quality of the school. So instead of letting the school fall into what I rail against, which is underfunded, poor schools in the city of Cleveland or in urban neighborhoods, I decided to shut the schools down at the time and then to live to fight another day when we can actually have maybe garner more resources. And so then I shut the schools down for that reason.
Okay. You are aware of Wings Academy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, we were engaged together. Dr. David Whitaker, George Frazier. Yes, I'm absolutely aware of them.
Okay. I'm thinking that possibly the work that you were doing to create the circumstances that would enable a charter school such as Wings to exist. And I'm happy to say that it's in operation, and there are students in our school district that can take advantage of an African-centered curriculum and get a certain sense of identity and cultural awareness. So the work that you did was not in vain, and the tradition continues. And actually, it needs to expand because, you know, as you pointed out, that the education system really isn't for us.
No.
And, you know, and that's the reason that we have to take matters into our own hands.
We do.
You commented a few moments ago about the mayor's takeover of the school system. Can you express how that has affected the present state of education here in the city?
That's a good question. You know, and I think about this question sometimes because, you know, when the mayor took over the schools, they not only just, so what also happened was the board of the school changed from an elected board to an appointed board, right? And the board of the school system is what oversees and runs the schools. It sets the policies. It sets the, so, I am not confident that I can say that the mayoral control has improved the conditions of the schools, because I also saw how once they went from mayoral control, once they went from an elected board, that it became tighter in terms of more public engagement, more parental engagement. Because at one of my roles in the Cleveland School District was I was director of parental involvement for the school system. And so I saw how instead of engaging parents, they began to only want to work with parents that were sanctioned by the Cleveland Municipal School District. And when you do things like that, and you think that you know more than what the parents know, I'm not sure you end up getting the best results. So I think part of the reason we're in the conditions that we're in now is because of the school system being under mayoral control. But you can make an argument that when they turned the schools over to mayoral control, that the schools were under state receivership at the time, right? And so in order for the schools to come out of state receivership, they said the best way to run the school system is give the mayor control. But what Cleveland was also doing at the time, they were modeling the school system in Cleveland after Chicago, because Chicago they were the first urban school district in America to use this model for urban education, which was a mayoral control, and Cleveland followed suit. So I can't say unequivocally that it's been because, as you see, you can see the conditions. I mean, we just laid off almost 400 people in the school system. The graduation rates are poor. I mean, we haven't been, but charter schools are expanding, and we also need more schools like Wings. And I'd be interesting to see, how, the school, like an Afrocentric school that we need, can get the kind of support that it needs, right? So it's not a clear-cut answer how mayoral control has impacted where we are today.
Well, I've had this thought for a few years actually about the mayor having control of the system, and looking at the idea that every year after year after year, the Cleveland school system gets a grade that's not a passing grade, D's and F's.
Right.
So I'm thinking, if the mayor is in a position to influence the curriculum in a failing system, perhaps you can change the curriculum so that students get something out of it, even though the system in its evaluation by the state isn't succeeding. It could succeed in other areas, and perhaps you could put art in the schools. You could put Black history in the schools. You could give the students something that is going to benefit them, regardless of the grade that they get from the state.
It's not going to happen, and it won't happen because, and this is not rocket science. I mean, children, if you don't see yourself in the curriculum, if you don't see yourself in the education process, you tune out. And that has happened, has been happening, and it's going to continue to happen as long as we don't advocate for our own people, for the education, for the proper education for our people. So you can try to motivate folks, but what motivates folks is when they see themselves, they see the reason why, they understand that this has something to do with me, that there's other people that came before me. I mean, so until that happens, we're going to continue to have the same results. It's not going to change at all. So we have to figure out ways and we've been, we have to figure out ways, like yourself, like you figured out a way to put information out in the world that is going to be beneficial to our people. You created this platform. We got to continue to do things like this, even if it's small, and build and support each other. Otherwise, the Cleveland school is going to be the same. It's not going to change. And it's not just Cleveland. It's all of these urban districts around the country do exactly the same thing. And we know what we need to do. And we've been talking about this forever. We know what our children need. We know what our people need. But I think we get into these positions. I'm the superintendent. I'm the CEO. and you're making good salary. You got a good living, and you're not going to challenge that. You're only going to go but so far. So I think, what you're noticing is spot on.
Yes. Well, it's interesting too, and I think about this not just in education, but in other realms in which people are put out there as leaders, because you have athletes that are seen as leaders. You have other folks that are seen as leaders. People in hip hop and entertainment are seen as leaders. But the issue that I see is that many of these people don't really grow up with an understanding of who they are and what they are, and they don't have any concept of an African-centered existence. And then they get in these positions, and then you expect them to have consciousness that they don't have. So this is kind of a perfect segue into a conversation about your book, because we definitely need some clarity, because we're living in the midst of confusion. We're going to step away for just a few moments, about 60 seconds or so, and we're going to come back with more 360 Info Network right after this message from the Cleveland Observer. Stick with us. We will be right back.
Cleveland has stories worth telling and voices that deserve to be heard. That's why the Cleveland Observer is proud to sponsor 360 Info Network with Vince Robinson and Antonio on AM 1490 WERE, where truth, culture, and conversation come together. Each week, host Vince Robinson and Antonio open the door to powerful discussions, from the arts and community history to the issues shaping our neighborhoods today. And the Cleveland Observer is right there with them, shining a light on the people and movements building a stronger Cleveland. Tune in to 360 Info Network and visit cleobserver.com to read, watch, and share more stories that inform, inspire, and unite our community. Because together, we are Cleveland's voice.
Really happy to have the Cleveland Observer aboard as our title sponsor. If you are interested in becoming a title sponsor or sponsoring, just reach out. You can send us an email at THA_SOULPOET@yahoo.com. You can also drop an inbox on the 360 Info Network Facebook page, and we will do what we can to get your business on the air. Thank you for joining us. If you are just joining us, our guest is Dr. Tim Goler. He is the author of Liberated Mind, A Guide to Black Clarity. We talked about the confusion that's happening in our world, especially around the institution of education in this country. But you have some ideas that you want to share with us, and you've done it through a book. So talk to us about this great book that you've written.
I want to start off with a quote, and it's a quote by a brother. His name is Runugu Rashidi. You remember him?
Absolutely.
Bad brother. And he said, and I think this will frame what I want to share with you. He said, what you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you've been told, right? Liberated Mind, a guide to Black clarity, is really about how we as a people have been shaped in this country, or some people refer to it as conditioned, if you will, not just by what's been done to us, but by what we've had to internalize to survive. And I use a metaphor in the book. I use a metaphor of the bonsai tree, right? And I call it the bonsai theory. You know, remember Dr. Frances Cress Welsing?
Yes.
She used a theory called the Cress theory, where she gave us a theory to understand our conditions. And so the bonsai theory, I offer a theory to understand how our thinking has been shaped. And basically, the bonsai theory says that if you restrict the roots of a tree, it grows small, even though it has the potential to grow tall. That's what happens to a lot of us, right? Not because we lack ability, but because we've been shaped inside limits that we didn't even choose. And so the book is about recognizing those limits mentally, emotionally, culturally, and deciding what parts of that we're going to keep and what we're going to break, right? And so that's kind of, you know, what it's about. And you know, and what I tried to do, and is build on in this book the traditions of Black thought that has helped us understand ourselves over a long time. So I talk about, like, I talk like Frantz Fanon, who showed us that the colonized began to see themselves through the eyes of the colonizer. That oppression doesn't just stay outside, it gets inside of our mind. I talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, who gave us the idea of double consciousness, right? That tension of always seeing ourselves through the eyes of others, of a society that misreads us. I talk about Bell Hooks, right? Who helped us understand how emotional suppression becomes both protective, but also a kind of prison. And then the person who wrote the foreword of my book, my mentor, Dr. Naim Akbar, who reminds us that our thinking as a people shapes our being, that clarity of mind is central to how we live and move in this world. So what I try to do is try to synthesize all of that in this book.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about that bonsai concept, and I think of that and relate it to our perception of ourselves in relation to the great divine. I'm just going to use that term. People can call it God, whatever. I'm just going to say the great divine today.
Right.
But I think, you know, through the process of religion and through the process of education and basically the paradigms of indoctrination, we've really been pushed into shrinking ourselves to a point where we never really fully realize our potential because we don't see it, because we've been told that you come into the world as a sinner, you know, all these things that kind of demean us and then connect us to something that's going to provide some type of salvation for us that's outside of ourselves. When you listen to the folks who are in that new age realm, so to speak, everybody talks about the idea of God being within you. There are folks out there that say, you know, we are gods, you know, right. but we're afraid to express something like that because it's seen as blasphemy. In the realm of sociology and psychology, do you see any benefit to people connecting with that understanding or consciousness or awareness of how they are connected to the great divine?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of it is what's so crucial about clarity is the ability to kind of see all of these structural things that impinge on our thoughts, right? we move through the world every day. You get up this morning, you have your coffee, you do what you do, you move, but you're not really thinking and seeing like that there are social forces that impinge on us, right? And so so part of that is, that's why I talk about like that I had mentioned to you earlier about the idea of the social construction of reality, right? So that when you are born, you're born into a particular context. And so when you're born you might be born as a Catholic, you might be born as a Pentecostal, you might be born as a Jehovah's Witness, you might be born and this is what shapes your belief system. But you're also born in a particular time frame, in a particular family. I was born in a particular neighborhood in Glenville, right? And it shaped everything I thought about. And we don't even think about the policies that's wrapped around us, the educational system that we are educated in. I was educated in the Cleveland School District. I went to Miles Standards Elementary. I went to Empire. Then I ended up going over to Lincoln West and graduating over there because the system at the time was trying to desegregate the school system. So they took all the black kids out of our neighborhoods and buses all the way across town to try to desegregate the system, because and if they really were interested in really being helpful, they could have sent us over to maybe Shaker Heights or some other school system where they had resources, but they sent us a poor neighborhood to another poor neighborhood, and so the poor quality over here was poor quality over there. So part of it is being able to see clearly through what it is, and then in order to do that, though, there's some things we have to do in order to get to a place where we can see clearly, because what we know is what we know. And so whether that in our beliefs or our beliefs. And so, but the issue is we go through life and there's this inherent thing in us. We go, something just ain't right. Something just don't seem right. And you can tell by how we move. We might have good intentions, but our intentions are not allowing us to move in a healthy way, because and the proof is in the pudding. All you got to do is look at our families, look at the conditions of our neighborhoods, look at the conditions of our families, look at the conditions of black men. We are not in good shape. Not that we don't have the ability, to your point, to what I'm saying, but we don't have it's not an ability problem that we have, right? We have a clarity problem. We don't have a talent problem. We don't have a potential problem. We've got a clarity problem. And I think once that shifts, everything else moves.
The clarity, from my perspective, Brother Tim, is us knowing who we are. But we seem to be confused about that. Just like back in the 70s or whenever it was, they decided that putting black children on a school bus and sending them to the other side of town so that they could sit next to a white person was somehow magically going to improve their educational experience. But it essentially destroyed it, because it removed, for one thing, it removed the parent from involvement in the process.
You better know it. It's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I got sent over to Lincoln West, and it was Puerto Ricans and poor whites, but the teachers, I mean, still lovely teachers and this, that, and the other, but again, it took us from the environment that for all intents and purposes, I know when I grew up, Glenville might be poor now, but it was a tight community. I didn't even know that fact that we was poor. We had a tight community. I can be outside and be around the corner, and my grandmother come out on the porch and say, "Tim, come home," and it'll get all the way around the corner to me, and somebody tell me, said, "Tim, your grandma wants you to come home," and I'll go home. It was a community. But when they start busing us across town, that shifted a lot.
Well, I think too, it's just the idea of self-determination. You know, there were times before the previous or before the current model of education where teachers could decide what they wanted to share with their students. So they
Right.
could give them Black history. I have a friend who is a teacher in New York and New Jersey, and she was cited for insubordination because she taught students about coins. She said that the students didn't know a nickel from a quarter.
Mm.
She taught them certain things about money, but because it wasn't in the curriculum, it wasn't in the lesson plan or whatever, she was cited for insubordination. And to make matters even worse, now they want to take her license away from her
Yeah.
because she
Yeah.
wants to teach children something that they need to know. How can we have a school system that doesn't equip students that way?
Vince, we are in bad shape. As somebody that's been in education for a long time, I wouldn't be a teacher for nothing in the world. Let me tell you why. Because you're not teaching. I mean, you can't teach like a lot of it was teaching to the test. A lot of people preparing to try to teach kids to take these standardized tests, so you're not allowed to really teach. You have to stay within a particular standardized way of actually doing it. And then, so if you're not allowed to teach, and now, given the particular political context in which we live in this society, you really can't teach. So that's why these conversations that we're having right now are highly important, because if we do not get to a place of where we understand how crucial it is for us to be able to understand that our mind is the foundation of everything. The mind is the foundation of everything. And we have to begin to understand these things. And, and it isn't just about being free from something. I want to be clear about this. It's not just about this idea that we need to be free from something. If we think about the context in which we're living in right now, it's not going to always be like this. I believe that there's going to come being extremely repressive on us, not minimizing the curriculum, minimizing the kind of oppressing the knowledge that we can read, banning books. It's about, for me, what do we do next? How do we prepare ourselves for when this is over, so that as a people, we come out of this stronger and in a better position? And the only way we're going to get that, in my opinion, is we got to get our mind right.
I absolutely 100% agree. And I'm thinking about universal laws. One of the very first ones is the universe is mental. And the war that's taking place right now is a war in the mind. It's someone exercising their mental control over you and keeping you away from what you need to understand about yourself, so that you're in control as opposed to them being in control. I'm also mindful of the fact that we spend a lot of energy and time talking about the future. For instance, Elon Musk wants to put a chip in your brain and use that chip to give you all the information that you need, so that you don't have to sit in a classroom. And if you want to access information, all you have to do is have a thought or go to some type of device and get whatever it is that you need. And that's a rather dystopian view, but in terms of the future versus the present, you can be free in your mind today if you have the right mentality,
Right.
So
yeah, but look what Elon Musk wants to do in the future. Where he wants to put a chip where? Not in your rib, not in your stomach. He wants to put a chip in your mind, in your brain,
right,
where it has the ability to control your thoughts. This is now and in the future. They understand it's always been that way from the very beginning. If I can control, if you can control a man's thinking, control a man's mind. And so from my perspective, we spend a lot of time fighting all these external battles, right? Which we have to do. But we haven't spent enough time individually and collectively with what those battles have done to us inside, right? And so I feel like we I can say, and if we don't get clear internally, we can't build what we want to build as a people. So I mean, this is to me like this is nothing new. What I'm saying to you is nothing new. I mean, the ancients of ancients said, talked about this. What do you say? Know thyself. One of the first commandments is to know thyself. But if we don't if we don't stay on top of this, if we don't continue to push this agenda, then then our children, particularly now, given what you just mentioned, this technology. Just think about AI for a minute. I'm in education. I'm in higher ed, and we talking now about they trying talking about how they policies around AI and this, that, and the other. And one of the biggest problems I see with this AI, first of all, is wonderful in one instance, and it's not in another, because it takes away from I believe some of our children's, our young people, our adults' ability to think critically, because the information is like right there. So you're not even thinking. I mean, the only thing you got to really do is come up with a prompt, right? But and the other thing is the fact that these databases, these AI databases, are built on Eurocentric platforms, not built on our thoughts. So we're in trouble if we don't begin to assert ourselves in terms of our mental sovereignty over ourselves as individuals and as a group. Otherwise, we're going to continue to, and it's going to continue to, in my opinion, to exacerbate the inequalities that already exist, which are wide, right? And I think the key to closing these gaps is getting clear in our thinking.
Yeah. And to your point, I want to offer the fact that the chip doesn't have to be in the brain. The chip is actually the phone that you spend 3 or 4 hours a day looking at, and the computer screens and the television screens and the music that they use to control thought. I mean, it's a very elaborate system of mind control.
Very elaborate. I mean, and it's becoming more elaborate, right? I mean, and the thing about it is, which is so mind-boggling to me, is the fact that many of us don't see the impact of the things that impinge on our thinking. And I think part of the issue is we believe that quote unquote success covers over our ability to think that we're doing well. What I mean by that is, because I have a degree, because I'm Dr. such and such, well, I'm not the person that's being affected by any of these things that impinge on my mind. So I already think clearly. And I am already in a good position. It's not me that's the one you're talking about. Well, in fact, it is, because if you look at it, that one of the biggest issues that I believe that we have in our community is what I call is an intraracial crisis, is our class differences. They over there, I'm over here. You got to get yours, I got mine.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with them, not me. Right? So none of this is what we're talking about right now has any impact on me, because my mind is clear. I am liberated. and which I would argue that you're the person that is most not liberated.
Yeah.
Because you're going through a system. If I allow Case Western Reserve, if I went to Case Western Reserve, I'm the first Black man to get a Ph.D. in sociology at that university that's been around since 1826. That is pathetic.
Yes.
That's absolutely pathetic. But if I just did what they told me to do and was just who they tried to shape me to be, I would be a worthless brother with a PhD from Case Western Reserve University and probably end up being president of the university.
Yeah. You know, as you were expressing a few moments ago, I couldn't help but think about Skip Gates.
Yeah.
Standing on the front step of his house, having to prove to somebody who he was.
That's right.
And him thinking that, hey, I'm Skip Gates, but that didn't matter because to that officer that was taking you through that turmoil, I hate to say it, but you just another N-word.
That's it.
That's the reality of America. We're going to talk about some solutions and we're going to talk about how we can liberate minds because it's one thing to talk about the problem. Yeah. We also have to have solutions. And I'm sure some of that is within the pages of the book that you've written. It's called Liberated Mind, A Guide to Black Clarity. And we're going to talk about that more when we return. Just a few announcements before we make the migration over to our online platforms on YouTube and Facebook. And I'm just letting you know, I'm getting text messages from your friend. He has some questions for you. So I'm gonna let him ask some questions too. Okay.
All right.
All right. We're going to have a great event at Larchmere Arts this evening. I am going to be playing piano for Victoria Roseman. She has a beautiful voice, y'all. So come on through. It's only $15 tonight. I'm going to have something for you to sip on and maybe a few munchies. You know, we're not going to lay out the buffet tonight because it's only a $15 event. But y'all come on through and enjoy the beautiful songstress Victoria Roseman. Also want to take the opportunity to thank our engineer, Tone Harley. You know, when things go wrong, it's usually on my end. It's not on his end. And what happened was when I started the show, I had a window open on my computer and it was giving me feedback. So we got through that and we will get through whatever we need to get through to bring you this information. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your best day. Peace, y'all. 12 o'clock noon right here on YouTube and Facebook. My guest is Dr. Tim Goler. He's the author of Liberated Mind, A Guide to Black Clarity. We've talked about some of the issues in our education. We talked about the impact of integration on our condition in this city, Cleveland, and other places in the country. And we have been talking about liberating a mind, and we talked about the expanse of mind control. And I do have some questions that have been sent to us by some of our listeners, but I also want to have a conversation with you about your vision on how to liberate the mind. So if you don't mind, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I put forth a theory in the book called the Reconstructed Self Theory. Right. And the theory is based on 5 sequential pillars. And so the first pillar that has to be done first, in my opinion, is to unlearn, which I often say is one of the most underutilized tools in our toolbox as humans, right? The ability to unlearn kind of inherited beliefs that we've inherited in ourselves, right? To unlearn kind of some of the survival habits that may have been good for us in the beginning, but are actually stifling us now, right? To unlearn old rules and old expectations that might have been good for us at one point, you know, that are that limit our ability to grow because of what our parents or our grandparents told us that we needed to do in order to survive in the system. Kind of that, don't talk too loud. You need to, you got to work twice as hard to do certain things, right? And then this the idea in terms of unlearning to be able to question what we've been taught to accept, right? And that's tough sometimes because we've been taught to accept certain things, but then to question it feels off to us. So that's the first one. So you got the, unlearning. Then the second pillar would be to reclaim the mind, right? To reclaim that mental ownership, the mental sovereignty of your mind, the self-definition, the internal authority, to stop performing and start authoring your life. Then the next pillar would be to align the identity, right? To align your identity with your values, with your choices, with your daily behaviors, with, to close the gap between who you are and how you live. And then the next two pillars would be, this one is very difficult for a lot of us, is to restore discipline and boundaries. Discipline and boundaries, have healthy limits, self-control, consistent routines, the stability replaces, for instance, the survival mode. And discipline is a hard thing for us sometimes. And then the last pillar is to activate. This is the part where you activate the reconstructed self. You have much more thoughtful action, strategic choices, and you respond now with clarity than always reacting. So I think there's a process. So what I tried to do in the book was to kind of lay out a sequential path that a person could take that could help them get to a place of clarity.
It's interesting when you talk about unlearning and reconstructing and aligning your identity with value and those things. They're kind of symptomatic of people who are waking up. We have this notion of the age of Aquarius, and the age of Aquarius being that age of information, and the veil being lifted, and we're finding things out. For instance, just within the past few months, I've gotten this awareness of the Ethiopian Bible.
Yes.
And the message on earth. The message is basically not follow me, be me.
Be me. Yes. Be me.
So, we talked in the last hour about the way we minimize ourselves. But when you have a consciousness that you can do things that are even greater than, quote, he did, then who are you? And what are you? And what abilities and powers do you have as a result of this consciousness that you have now that you didn't have before? So when you talk about unlearning things, when you talk about reclaiming the mind, and all those things, that they're just kind of built into that whole thought process.
Yeah, that's why I try to use this simple metaphor of the bonsai tree, right? So you got the bonsai tree, that seed that if you took the seed of a bonsai tree and you just drop that seed in soil, that tree has the same DNA as an oak tree. It can grow. It has full potential to grow as far as it possibly can. But because of the container that tree is in, that bonsai is in, it limits its growth, right? And so we too have that. And the key is to be able to recognize and see and break free of those containments, that containment, that limitations. And so then we have the ability to kind of, we don't have a potential problem. We don't have that. We don't have a talent problem. It's the clarity of seeing the things that constrain us And once we're able to understand and identify those things, then there's work to be done. Now, let me say this. This ain't easy to do. It sounds like what I'm saying to you, it sounds simple. And I'm explaining it simple, unlearn. The part of the issue is we might have great intentions, but the work of doing it, the work of, and I'm not even going to put this in the mental health space in terms of, people talking about trauma and healing, this, that, and the other. But the issue is hard because we become who we believe that we think we are. And so when we start to question those beliefs, everything else around us changes. We may look at our family completely different. You may be the person that's an outlier that people start saying, what's wrong with you? But you're the one that's gaining the clarity, right? And everybody else is staying within the confinements or the container of what they have been taught to believe. So this is not easy work. And that's part of the reason that we're in the position that we're in as a community, because it's hard to do the work, because then who are you when you step outside of what you thought you were?
Yeah. I give you a perfect example. When it comes to medical issues, we're often told that, well, it runs in the family.
Yeah.
So, 30 years ago, we were eating fried chicken like it was soursop.
Yeah.
And then we learned that there's white flour that's used. The white flour is bleached completely. There's no nutrients in that. We fried the chicken in seed oil. It's high in omega-6 fatty acids. It's going to affect our bodies in a negative way. But we learned how to eat from those who came before us, and we continue to do those things. And then you get this thing called awareness, and then you find out how detrimental this is, but you don't have the fortitude to say, okay, well, I'm not going to eat the fried chicken. I'm just, Sunday, we going down in the basement after service. We're going to have fried chicken. We're going to have some collard greens with some ham hocks in them, have macaroni and cheese. It's going to clog our arteries. And we don't have the discipline to make the change based on the awareness and information that we have. So we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over. And, that's the definition of insanity, expecting a different result when you keep doing the same thing. So there's a whole lot of reconstruction that needs to take place.
Yeah.
And the reclamation of the mind fits into the whole theme that seems to be very prevalent right now. And that is remember who you are.
Yes. Let me just say this too, because you made me think, and so the book is co-published by the National Institute for African American Health, right? Like, what in the world how is that connected, right? And I just, if you give me just a second, I want to share with you just a part of what the publisher's note in the book, so you can see the connection. It says, at the National Institute for African American Health, we understand a truth that public health too often ignores. And this is to your point, what you just talked about. Health is whole. It cannot be reduced to a lab values or clinical encounters. It emerges at the intersection of body, mind, environment, history, and lived experience. One more thing. For decades, medicine has focused on downstream outcomes like hypertension, diabetes, premature mortality, without addressing the upstream conditions that produce them. Chronic stress, unaddressed trauma, internalized limitations are not abstract concepts. They are biologically embodied realities that shape cardiovascular risk, immune function, and life expectancy. Mental clarity is not separate from physical health. It is foundational to it. So that speaks to what you are saying about eating chicken and getting diabetes and this, that, and the other. I mean, just the whole idea, but it's all connected, and it all stems from how we believe and think about what is, but part of it is we're not making the connections. And that's why part of the reasons that black men is dying from a stress and hypertension, and obesity is running rampant, right? But it's all prevalent right in our the frontal lobes of our mind.
Yes. I want to share a few thoughts that have come from our friend Robert. He says, remember, people acquire their view of self from the agents of socialization. The family is the first and most significant for us building racial ego. Our efforts must include a component that addresses the flip from 80% stable black families with a man in the home to 80% without a stable man in the household who is married to the mother. Until that happens, many of our people will continue to drift and be fodder for the prison industrial labor complex, extracting forced labor.
Yeah. And that's from Brother Robert Allen. And,
yes, it is.
And it's absolutely true what he's saying. And I mean, the family is the nucleus, right? And so if the man, and I said this many times, I say that whether we like it or not, the sanity of our community is heavily dependent upon the sanity of black men. And as long as the black man is in the condition that we are in, we're going to continue to reap whatever benefits or non-benefits that are happening. And so the responsibility for the improvement of the conditions of our community, in my opinion, lies solely on us as black men. And if we don't get our mind right, if we don't begin to do these, then our families are going to continue to be in the conditions that they're in. And it is so important because not just our family, but then once you can have, see this, how can I say this? A clear mind is a revolutionary act. I know it sounds so simple, but if we did this, if we took the time, I mean, you think about like brothers like that, like Malcolm X, right? When he went away to prison, the thing that liberated his mind was the fact that he started working on his mind. Then he came out and then he began to work towards the liberation of our people. That's every person that is that leader that has substantially tried to figure out how to improve the condition of our community. They start with liberating their mind. Outside of that, we end up, our families look like they look, our communities look like they look. The schools, we continue to blame the Cleveland schools and say the Cleveland schools not, instead of taking more control. And see, that's again, if we did what we supposed to do for our own self, our own thinking, our own clarity of mind, we ain't gonna be worried about no Cleveland school district because we'll create our own. We'll figure that out. And we'll come together as a people. We'll think different. I can look at you, brother, and say, I love you, bro. I love you because I'm comfortable in my own skin and I know who I am and I have clarity of mind. That's what happens when we start working on this. Otherwise, I'm afraid of you. I don't love you. You did something to me. Blah, 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 blah. We end up getting the same results. But that's why this one simple thing, this one simple act, but it's an act that you have to have intention towards, and you got to do the work to make it happen because it's there. And that's why these conversations that we're having are so deeply important.
Yeah, you talk about restoring the mind and you talk about discipline and setting down boundaries and so forth and so on. And I think one of the critical issues is that many, if not most of us, live within the paradigm of a survival mentality. And it's the survival mentality that keeps us away from the critical and analytical thought. It's by design, it's intentional. You talked about Frances Cress Welsing earlier, and I think a lot of it just has to do with a certain entity's fear of losing control over us and the things that happen in order to maintain that control. And I think the idea of fear is what keeps us from having the mentality of a Malcolm X or a Martin Luther King, who at a certain point lose their fear of death. Right. Because that's what they use to control us. Oh, well, if you don't do this, you're gonna die.
Right.
And you see yourself within the limitation of a life within this body, but then you come to an understanding that you are eternal. So even if they take you out, they can't take you out because you can't be completely eliminated. You'll come back. These right. young folks that are coming to us now with the accumulation of all the things that they've gotten over all those lifetimes, now they're hitting the ground running. Now it seems that some young people have more awareness than older folks. It's that whole fear of death, fear of dying that's being used to control us.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and we can have a whole long conversation about how religion has been used and how it continues to be used for the good and the negative, right? We can have that kind of conversation, and fear definitely has, limited our ability to kind of stretch and not be fearful of, and I think also the idea is that we have been so oppressed. I mean, sometimes I think we think that, why are we still talking about this stuff? We good to go. Everything is good to go. I mean, we got people, we had Barack Obama, we got folks as vice president, we got doctors and lawyers and this, that, and the other, but people don't understand that, like, we just got, in my lifetime, we just got the right to vote, right? I mean, Jim Crow didn't end until, legally until the late 1960s. Then you had all this war on drugs and the mass incarceration, and so none of this stuff is gone. Didn't go anywhere. We just happen to be living in the midst of it. And we're thinking because we got iPhones and AI, we in good shape, but we're not. And, so we think, though, that we look at, to your point earlier, when you start talking about athletes and entertainers, right? We have been conditioned to think that, well, Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey, they billionaires, and Jay-Z, they billionaires. So that's what I'm going to strive to become. I want to be in the NBA. I want to be in the NFL. I want to be Luther Vandross, right? And so those become the things that, I want to wear this Rolex. I want to drive that car. I want to have that. And all of it's external. None of it's been focused on what do you really value versus materialism versus, the pursuit of all these external things that have no communal value, no value that is really about really trying to, how do we move as a people? Who are we really, right? And so we've been defined through a system that benefits from the masses of us being in a condition of sleep, if you will, right? So a fear has been one of the tools that has been used to kind of suppress the fear of losing, the fear of, if you say something, you're going to lose your job. Not, we should have been thinking about not being employees, but owning our own business. That's one of the reasons. I got to stop for a second and congratulate you. I wanted to say this earlier. I got to congratulate you on the decision you made to with your job situation and then to open up the Lawrenceburg Arts. I want to congratulate you on that, because that is what I believe clarity of mind is in action. That's exactly what I'm talking about when for instance, the kind of things that we talk about in this book. Once you get clear, you begin to move differently. See? And if you hadn't made the move that you made, we wouldn't be right here talking about this right here today.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying. The power and the clarity of mind has benefits beyond what we even actually believe that we think they have. You thinking you doing maybe something for yourself that you want to do to free your own self, but understanding that the clarity that you had, the clarity that made you move differently to open up Lawrenceburg Arts to create this kind of platform now is blessing other people. That's the power in it.
Well, I have to tell you that, it was 12 years ago that I made that decision. And one of the things that I came to conclude was that the only way I could be free is if I would free myself. I had a corporate job.
Yeah.
They wanted me to hang on until 62 so I could get all of the pension that was due me. But I had reached a point where it's like, this is not serving me anymore. And I couldn't allow fear of not having to keep the shackles on my ankles and my wrists and my brain. So I had to say, no, this ain't me anymore, and step away. Within the Christian context and religious context, they say they describe it as stepping out on faith.
That's right.
But it wasn't completely faith, because I had a strategy.
Right.
I'm like, okay, I have this much money, and then at a certain point, I'm gonna get access to more money. That's so right. I wasn't worried about not being able to take care of myself. I did the math.
That's right.
So I left the plantation, and then as a result, these things happen. But I also am not so egotistical or self-centered to think that it's about me, because I understand those who came before me equipped me with what I needed to carry out their mission.
That's right.
So this is their mission, just like what Quad David is doing with Wings Academy. That's his mission. Your mission is to provide information and insight to folks through the book that you've written and through the students that you reach in your educational practice. And I'm happy to say that you're in a position to feed folks that need to be fed and to bring out of them what needs to be brought out of them, just because you understand your role in the process.
That's right. And so when you were beginning to make that decision to free yourself, right, that's not an easy position. And a lot of us, it's not that we don't have a desire. It's not that we don't feel something in our bones, in our body. It's that we got to, some of us just don't know what to do, how to make a move, how to get free, how to move. We're good at diagnosing the problems, but then what do we do next? How do we make the move? Where is it laid out for us to say, well, if you follow these steps, or there's a pathway to do it, there's a process to do it. There's a, like you said, there's no, when people say that there's no book on parenting, right? But if you're able to, through your lived experience, Vince, through the things that you noticed throughout your life, through all the research that you've done, the things that you are able to if you were about to die and you said, well, I'm going to tell folks what I need to tell them. I'm going to let them understand what I'm going to lay it on the. You just tell them what you believe that people need to know, so they can be in a position like you are in a position. You just let them know. And so that's the way I approach this book. I say, you know what? I might not ever write another book ever. But if I'm going to say something, I'm going to put it down in this piece of paper, in this book, and give it to folks and let them go ahead and chew on it. And I know what we wrote and what we put together is truthful. It's the truth, and but it was my way of basically synthesizing the scholars and like I said before, the ones that I believe was true to our people. Instead of taking one, I try to synthesize and say, here's what we need to do. Here's a guide, just a guide, and take what you need from it. And so that it might be able to help you get to a position like Vince, so that you can move and be in a position where we can be in having a conversation like we're having today.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I'm also mindful of the power of words. I expressed this to Brother Lynn last week, and congratulated him on writing the book. But I think about this often. It was words that created the universe.
Hmm.
Let there be light, and there was light. The words carry vibration and frequencies, and those things matter. The words that we speak matter. So when they give us words like "I'm a minority," and we let that sink in, once again, we have shrunken ourselves, or we have allowed someone else to shrink us. And so that whole idea of self-determination comes back into play. When we look at the history of this country, we can see countless examples of when we took that seriously. I mean,
yeah.
Tulsa is pointed out as one of those things, but that was one of many situations where we took control, self-determination, grew our own food, had our own institutions, had our own banks, insurance companies, hospitals, all those things. We're capable, but we're not remembering that we have an ability to take care of ourselves on that level. And then don't let me even get started about Africa.
Mm-mm.
You got a continent that basically facilitates everything that happens on the planet. If you don't have the minerals and resources that come out of that place, you also have a continent that has the bandwidth to feed the entire planet. We don't understand the resources that we have, and we let someone else control those resources and control our minds.
And the thing about that, when I'm glad you mentioned Africa. Africa is thirsty for us to engage each other. The diaspora is thirsty for us to. The part of the confusion, part of the disillusion that has been put out for us as African Americans and Black folk in America is the disconnect between Africa and us. Every time I've engaged with brothers on the continent and institutions on the continent, it's like they can't. It's like, let's come on, let's bring it on, come on over here, let's bring it on. We want you. You're not trying to colonize us. We want to. We don't even have a clue of, but everybody else does, of the potential of our connection. If we were to actually connect with our brothers and sisters on the continent, that's what they fear. That you talking about fear. We ain't the one that's fearing. We're the ones that can't see clearly enough. Other folks are fearful of that connection. The connection to us in Africa is extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. So we definitely have to try to make that connection.
Yeah, it's interesting that you point that out, because what we get is them looking at us in a negative light and us looking at them in a negative light. And it's all because we don't know who we are. We don't know who they are. And we don't understand that we're one. That's the real issue. There's no separation between us and them. But what you have is the dysfunction, because we're so confused that you got indigenous, you got the folks who understand that we've been here all along, and that's very true. But then we have folks who want to minimize what happened 400 years ago when we were brought over here. Some of us were brought over here, but we're all one family. And, the common narrative, just based on misinformation, disinformation, and, the idea that we should be opposed to each other, that's what really maintains that. And here's the other thing, and I wanted to speak on this moments ago when we talked about unlearning. We're told, go to school, get a job, buy a house, buy a car, pay for an education that you will never finish paying for, and you'll give that debt to your progeny.
Right.
That's what we're told. We're not told, realize what your purpose in life is. And so, people live their lives not really even knowing, why am I here? If you're not living in your purpose to a certain extent, it's a wasted life because you were put here to do certain kinds of things. And then the other thing is just the whole idea that you can only do one thing.
Exactly.
You know, it's like we're multidimensional beings. Tim Goler is not just an educator.
Right.
You know, you are a creator. HBCU Prep, Policy Bridge, these things are creations. And from my personal perspective, and I'm just, you know, sharing with you where my mind is, I think we all have an ability to create, but many of us, we never wake up to it. And so we don't serve humanity from the idea of being someone who is a creator.
Yeah.
I do a lot of advocating for artists, and in the past few years, I've really seen the potential that we have. You know, this past year, we saw something called the Transformative Art Fund. We got $3 million from Uncle Sam, and the city of Cleveland decided not to just pass that money out to artists. They said it had to be a project-based type situation.
Right.
So they put out a call and they invited artists to submit proposals. We got 100, I think it was about 107 proposals from artists. And we spent that money with artists who created things that had never been imagined. And they continue to have an impact on the city. The leadership of this city has not really figured out the need to empower artists and enable them to create things that will make a difference. And it has to happen. If you want to see change, you have to facilitate these types of things. But the clarity, to use your word, the clarity is not there on their part. And the clarity isn't within us because we don't understand the power that we have as artists.
Well, well, see, you mentioned this before. See, the clarity helps you shape narratives, right? Clarity helps you shape your narrative. And when you talk about art and you talk about us as humans, all of us are creative human beings because we are from the creator. I mean, so we are creative beings. And so, but we're taught and in these United States, and when we were that, you know, you get a job, you stay with this job for so long, you retire, blah blah blah, and then you're taught that it's wrong to be different and to have to recreate. You're in some kind of the space that you're in, and you're not doing well if you have to recreate yourself. And in fact, again, it's how you shape your own narrative, right? I could tell you right now, just based on what we just said, I done had about 10 lives. A Policy Bridge, I was in the Marine Corps, blah, blah, I can go down the line, right? But I don't look at them as different lives. I look at them as a continuation of my purpose in showing out in the way in which I was supposed to show out, right? I'm a professor and an associate professor at a university in the sociology department. Did I think I was going to be there when I was in Cleveland and at Lincoln West and at Miles Standish Elementary School? Absolutely not. I didn't even have an aspiration to go into this space until my last year at Case Western Reserve. I wasn't going to be no professor. So, but if you think of yourself as you mentioned, as a creator, as a creator of ideas, as a creator of life, as somebody that shapes your world, because that's the way the world is shaped, and you are a part of that creation. You're a creator. That's what you do. Then we all are that way. But we've been defined by society to think a certain way, and that way is limiting who we are as people.
Yeah. Those thoughts again come back to religion, education, indoctrination. I was thinking a few moments ago, just going back to your bonsai example and seeing the evidence of it in my own family. My mother has 3 sisters and 3 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And they grew up in Massillon, Ohio. My grandfather came up to Massillon because he had been accused of a crime that he did not commit and he had to escape. So he came up to Massillon and they had 7 children. My mother connected her sisters with opportunity to leave Massillon.
Mm-hmm.
She married my father. My father's Air Force veteran, traveled the world, left Massillon. The 3 sisters left Massillon. One of them ended up working for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, lives in San Francisco in this day.
Mm-hmm.
Another one works she works in Washington, D.C., lives in Maryland. But the whole thing was they had to leave that area in order to grow, in order to see the rest of the world. And that is what created opportunity for them. Now, I got one uncle that never really left Massillon. And so he was that person that was kind of on the outside looking in, and that was his choice. But the point is, the fact that they were able to leave that city opened them up to other possibilities that enabled them to enjoy a certain level of success in life. Right. I think about young people in this city who never leave the city, who never go beyond those boundaries of the ward or the city limits or whatever, and how they don't really perceive the world in its fullness. But then those who leave the city, they get a better understanding and idea of what the world has to offer, and it shapes their experience, just like you leaving Cleveland helped you shape your experience. So when I look at what they're planning for us now, they basically want everybody to stay at home and watch TV and order stuff on Amazon and DoorDash and experience reality that way. But it's an artificial, it's not a real reality.
Yeah, and that's the part that we got to push against, meaning that, look, ain't nothing wrong with technology in terms of it's going to happen. You're going to have cell phones, you got TV, you got Amazon. But you're right. So many of our young people in particular, their world is shaped by Instagram. Their world is shaped by TikTok. Their world is shaped by these social media, right? They become, to what Brother Allen was talking about in terms of the family, they become a socializing mechanism, right? And the issue is that which is more scary than anything is the thing called algorithms, right? They can shape something. The technology has such a power that could, it's not, we grew up with commercials, right, on TV, and you watch a commercial and a commercial, but these algorithms are so precise, that they can shape your thoughts unconsciously. So we get caught, our kids, our family, and so it has a tremendous impact. And if they're not aware of these influences that do shape their lives, well, we're going to, and our children grow up to be fathers, they grow up to be husbands, they grow up to be adults, they grow up to be our so-called leaders in our community. That is a scary proposition if we do not get to a place where we can see clearly enough to understand what are these social forces, as in social media as well, that are impinging on our thoughts. And I talk about that in the book.
I'm glad you brought up algorithms, because they can serve you, they can also injure you. Yes. And so, but I also think about this whole idea of quantum entanglement, how there is no separation for anything, really. It's all connected. When I look at social media, I understand that one of the things that drives it is just being able to expose you to things that you can buy. It's really about the almighty dollar. But I've been on Facebook probably since 2012, 2013 or whatever. I don't really do a whole lot on Instagram or TikTok, but I get exposure to those platforms through Facebook. And what I've noticed is where your attention goes, they focus on that and then they feed you more. And I think the idea is to keep you locked in so that, again, they can expose you to whatnot. But
yeah,
what I'm seeing based on the things that I watch is I've gained so much knowledge, so much information, and so much awareness just because of what my interests are.
right.
So, I'm learning Tai Chi
Right.
on Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm learning about the Ethiopian Bible on Facebook.
Yeah.
These things that are edifying, they're there. Now you could get caught up in watching things that really serve as a distraction and sucking you in and keeping you attached to whatever device you're watching. But there is some benefit that you can derive, but you have to be the person who decides what's important to you and what's not important to you.
Yeah.
So
I talk about I talk about this thing I call algorithmic amplification, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say social media platforms and search engines use algorithms that determine what content you see based on what will maximize your engagement as opposed to what will provide you the most accurate and balanced information. These algorithms often amplify content that triggers strong emotional responses, particularly outrage, fear, to your point, tribal identity. They create echo chambers where existing beliefs are reinforced rather than challenged. And they can rapidly spread misinformation that confirms biases or inflame tensions. And then I just said this one last piece. For Black folk, for Black users, these systems often amplify the most extreme or stereotypical representation of Blackness while marginalizing nuanced perspectives. They can promote content that reinforces negative stereotypes, heighten racial anxiety, or present isolated incidents as representative patterns. The result is a distorted picture of reality that shapes not only how others see us, but how we see ourselves and each other.
Yes.
So that's that, and it's done with things that we think we like, right? And it's dangerous if, to your point, we don't recognize and be extremely good consumers of the technology. But most of our young people and most of our adults aren't being consumers of not thinking about how we're just scrolling. We're going, oh wow, ooh, wow, look at this, wow, ooh, but we're not thinking about the impact of these the amplification of these algorithms that are hitting us in our face.
Yes. Critical thought. I go back to my experience with Okanta back at Ken in the 70s. And I remember a word he used to always use, and that was implications. And the thing is, when you're taking this information, you should be thinking about those implications, and you should also be thinking about it critically. It should be something that challenges you to think, to exercise some kind of mental veracity, But as you said, sometimes we just take this stuff in. You have to realize that when you scrolling and you come across a situation that's explosive, that's going to trigger you in a certain kind of way, you watching people fight, watching the conflict and all of that, you have to realize that, hey, this is not something that I need to even take into my brain.
Well, part of it is, Vince, is that it can become a release from reality, right? Our daily lives are sometimes so stressful, so filled with a lot of anxiety, a lot of movement, a lot of things is going on in our lives. And so to sit and scroll all day or take some time to scroll, we're not thinking about what is these. We're not thinking about algorithms amplifying and affecting our thoughts or shaping the way in which we see things or perspectives, or what's going on over in Iran, and how much information that we're not being told, and this. I mean, none of that is going through our minds while we're seemingly taking some time off, so to speak, and not being engaged with our daily activities of the stresses of our daily life. So that's what makes it, in some sense, even more insidious, is because it's also couched as a way in which that we sometimes it improves our mental health, so to speak. It makes you feel less. It makes some people feel like they can calm down because they can sit and scroll, right? But not thinking about the other, to your point, implications.
Yeah. Well, if you are scrolling and you run across a YouTube video with solfeggio frequencies that you can listen to and use to meditate, that's a worthy escape.
Yes.
But the mind is scrolling, and the fact that it also involves this thing that we call time.
Yes. Yes.
That's a very precious commodity, and it's just so important that you use it appropriately. So if you give too much time to those devices, it can actually impair you in a certain way. I want to ask you about AI. We've kind of danced around it a little bit. We talked about it in the first hour, and you mentioned how it may not be beneficial in certain aspects of the education process. But in an even larger sense, we're seeing AI reduce jobs because now you've got technology that can replace what humans have done or what humans do. When it comes to creative endeavors, there's a huge conversation going on in artistic circles about how much AI do we want to involve in our practices, because sometimes that AI can be a replacement for our talent. I know that there are probably some young folks that, might get an assignment, and the easy way out is to have ChatGPT write it for them.
Yeah.
And so they didn't exercise their brain power to create something. They just let learned language models do it for them. What are your thoughts about how AI is affecting education right now?
Man, that's a great question. This is one I deal with almost a daily basis. AI has pros and cons, right? There's pros and cons to it. Definitely students can use AI to write papers and do this, but as a consumer of AI myself, I can tell immediately when somebody used it, right? Because they don't write that perfectly, and nobody writes perfect. And a lot of students don't know how to use it. And I think part of what we have to do as educators is inform ourselves more about the technology so that we can help our students know how to use it, because it's not going anywhere. So you got to know how. So we need to be much more informed about how to use AI. But one of the issues is AI moves so fast. A lot of the professors and teachers can't keep up with how fast the technology moves. There's so much going on. So I think one is that the system itself can't run away from AI. You're going to have to figure out ways that because it's artificial intelligence, right? It's what is artificial intelligence. It's not real intelligence, but it's artificial intelligence. So then where do you bring in the real intelligence? Part of the real intelligence that's missing, that it dilutes, is critical thinking, right? I mean, the ability to think for yourself, the ability to kind of be clear in your thoughts, think for yourself, have an original idea. All these things was, first of all, having an original idea was hard to come up with when he didn't have AI. So imagine how that's going to be now when you got AI, and where you come up with an original idea, right? So I think the way in which you teaching has to change, because you cannot run from it. So teachers have to, educators have to, and other folks that even in your space of art has to not run from it, but think about how it complements what it is that you believe that we do. What is our business? What are we in the business of doing? And how does AI complement that instead of running from it? So I think we got to figure that part out. And I think that there's ways of like assessing, like for instance, sometimes, some of the old school ways of doing. I mean, I saw somebody the other day said, look, I gave my students a spelling bee. I was like, that's a great idea. I think I might do that. Like give them, remember when we was coming out, used to get a spelling test.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes old school stuff work better than the new school stuff. So thinking of creative ways that you can still engage it, still assess, but not be afraid of it. Because once you're afraid of it, then I think that's going to cause a problem. And then for us, particularly Black folk, we really got to engage it, because if we do not, AI is going to explode the racial barriers and differences in the society, because other folks are using this. And the other part is to use it to be able to access the best parts of it. You got to pay for, right? So you got to pay a $20 subscription for this or a $20 subscription for that. We ain't thinking about paying those subscriptions and stuff. So that means we're not accessing the better parts of the technology that exists right now. So we really I think we really need to have some more serious conversations about AI and racial inequality, AI, and how we actually embrace it and not be fearful of it, because it's not going anywhere, and it's going to be something that is going to be integral. It's going to change it's going to change education, period. It's changing education as it relates as it is right now. Do we need as many brick and mortar schools? Do we need a whole Cleveland school system the way it's designed and built right now? Maybe not. So it is affecting education. It's affecting the resources in education. It is a real issue, but in my opinion, we're not really honing in on these conversations and being proactive and talking about it. So I appreciate you bringing it up, because this is a big deal, and it's going to have it can have a positive impact, or it can exacerbate the differences between us if we don't jump on this now.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we're finding out about it is that it's not perfect. You can get information from ChatGPT or some of the other AI applications, and it's based on things that are on the internet, and they're not always accurate. So even if you use it, you have to review it and make sure that it is on point in certain ways. The other thing is that you have to challenge it. I remember a few months ago, I was online with ChatGPT. The version that I use is called Thoth. And I asked it about Jesus being a Black man. And it said that he was Middle Eastern. And so I challenged it. I said, well, how could he be Middle Eastern when the Middle East is not a real thing and it didn't exist at the time that he is said to have existed? And so it came back to me and it was like, oh, so and it revised the answer to the question that it was asked.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I was mentioned before. See, these AI platforms, chat, you can name them. They are not built on Black thought. They are built on Eurocentric ideas and philosophical, the data, right? They're not built on. So what they produce is not going, you got something, but it's not built on ideas from us, right? So, part of the problem with it is because AI can make a person lazy, intellectual lazy, because you get information like this. You don't spend time. Remember, back when we was coming up, we had card catalogs, right? I mean, you gotta put some skin in the game to gain some knowledge. You gotta have it. You can have an app on your phone and just look something up, and boom, it comes right there. And they're not taking the next move. A lot of us are not taking that next move. But what you just mentioned is saying, let's challenge the thoughts that came out of this. You just taking stuff verbatim because it sounds good and it makes immediate sense, and you can give an answer right away.
Yeah.
But that's what's so tough about it, is because you got to be able to, someone like you're pushing thought. You're asking the next question. Most of us are not doing that. We just take it for what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think what we have to do is get back to some basics. And the basics involve taking a pen and writing something on a piece of paper. The basics involve getting this thing called a book and opening it up and reading the words from the page, as opposed to reading something on the screen or having something read to you. And I know it's convenient, to be driving in your car and listen to that audio book, but you have a different experience when you open the page and read those words off the page. Simple things that we need to get back to. There's a saying out there: if you want to hide something from a Black person, what do? Put it in a book. Right. Okay. But, you just gave me an idea, and that is that we need to have our version of ChatGPT.
Oh, for sure.
Being creators, as you said. I'm putting it in your lap, Tim.
No, I'm good. No, but you are correct, though. I mean, and I'm not sure if people, John. I mean, but that's a big issue, right? It's like policy bridge, but AI. That's how I look at it, right? I mean, that's the reason, because you got the Brookings Institute, you got all kind of think tanks out there, but they're not built for us. They may do. I mean, we're the most studied group in America, but we're not studying ourselves. So that's an issue. And so where's the data? Where's the information coming from? What perspective is being put forth about who you are and who we are? Is not coming from us. And if it does come from us, most of the time it's not coming from us from a space that is African centered or centered on knowledge and information that is in the best interest of our people.
Yeah. And then when we do have things like Johnson Publishing and other things, they get acquired by other groups that take over, just like Black hair care products. The major companies buy up those companies, and then, we're not really serving our own interests. And, when they control it, they can change the chemical composition of the product, and then you're not getting what you got before. It's just like Monsanto taking over agriculture.
Right.
It's the same thing, but that just follows the model of how capitalists have been doing business for so long. And one of the biggest things that they do is they eliminate the competition by buying them out and by being the sole company. So, there's only one Amazon, there's only one Walmart. There's Home Depot and Lowe's that put hardware stores out of business in our neighborhoods. It just keeps going. But it's just amazing, how things are being shaped right now. And the whole thing, I think, right now is just our perception of reality.
Yes.
It can be stated that we're living in the best of times and the worst of times. And the question could be asked, well, how is that possible? But the concept of heaven and hell, right. Folks are living in hell right now.
Absolutely.
And there are some folks who experience heaven.
Absolutely.
Just because.
Yeah. And we think that because we see images heaven, if you will, to use this analogy, in our community, that the masses of us are doing well, and it's the absolute opposite. Our people as a group are not doing well, but we do have images of folks that are doing well, and whatever that well is, whatever we defining success is, and that's the other part is, you know, that we've been conditioned to define success based on someone else's perspective of what success is, right? You know, somebody might say, well, Vince, how are you successful? You would have been successful if you would have stayed at that company and stayed there till you were 62 years old and retired and pulled your retirement. You would have been successful. But you instead said, well, you know what? I'm going to do what I believe that is in the best interest of what I know for myself and for my community. And you chose that. Somebody might say, that's not success. That's not how you define success, right? And I would believe most of our people would define success differently if we weren't what success is imposed on what we believe is important in this world. And so we think that because you're the vice president of a bank, that you are successful. Sure, you may be successful as it's defined by our society, but are you doing anything to improve the condition of our community besides maybe tutoring some kids over at Booker T. Washington or Daniel E. Morgan a Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock? But none of that is really having enough impact that we are seeing the conditions of our community change. It's nice that we can tutor some kids, and nice that we can have a black tie to celebrate certain things, but we are missing the point of coming together as a group and figuring out how we improve the conditions of our people as one.
You just touched the nerve, because I think about all those banquets that happen in those hotels downtown Cleveland that aren't owned by us, and how we pour our money and our resources into them. We need to have our own institutions, but that's another topic for another day. I want to make sure folks know how they can get your book. So let's do that before we wrap up.
Oh yeah, well, you can go to my website, which is timgoler.com. You can get it there, or you can go straight to Amazon and you can just put in Liberated Mind, A Guide to Black Clarity, and you can get it and you can pick it up there. And it should be in some libraries here shortly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to advise those who are listening, make your first choice going to timgoler.com. You
Yes.
want to get the book, go to his website, because Amazon don't need they cut.
No, they don't.
They don't need it. I know it's easy to just go on Amazon, but go to timgoler.com. I'm going to put a link in the description for this video so people have access to it when they see this broadcast. And I thank you for this conversation. I thank you to Robert for bringing you to my attention. And I apologize to him that I couldn't share everything that he shared, because he shared a lot with me while we were on the air. But it was just important to me to hear your thoughts and to provide this platform for you to get the word out. And when you're ready, we can bring you to Larchmere Arts one weekend when you're in town.
Yes.
Or during the week, you have you come in, bring some books, let folks know that you're going to be there so they can get their autograph signed copy of it, and continue to share with the world the importance of a liberated Black mind.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you for joining me. And thank you to those of you who have been on with us on YouTube and Facebook. Don't forget, it really helps me out if you like, comment, subscribe, and share. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. I'm not going to inundate your email inbox with messages or anything like that, but you will get notifications if you hit the notification bell on when we put up content. On Saturdays, we do this show live, and it goes directly to YouTube. So if you missed the show, you can always pick it up later. So With that said, you know, I have a saying that you may have heard before: know yourself, which is connected to know thyself. Know yourself, love yourself. It's important to love yourself because you got to love yourself before you can love anyone else.
That's
And
right.
to be yourself, to be authentic. That's it. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and use your power to make your day a great day. With
That's right.
that, we'll say peace and end the broadcast. Hold on, I'm going to holler at you before you leave.